The sun blazed merciless over the hills of Mescalero, painting the land in fire and dust. Wind swept down from the ridges, carrying the sharp sting of grit and sage. Somewhere a hawk cried a single shrill note swallowed by the heat. Naya Riverbloom's wrists were raw where the rope had torn through flesh. The men who'd left her there hadn't even offered shade, just tied her to a fence post near the cracked bed of Whispering Creek, now just a muddy thread weaving through broken stone. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Sweat stung her eyes. She didn't dare close them. If she did, she might not open them again. Flies buzzed at the corners of her lips. She tried to whisper for help, for mercy, but her throat gave no sound. Her mind drifted to her father, Elias Riverbloom. Once proud, maybe too proud. The name had meant something once in New Mexico. Now it meant nothing at all. Their ranch was gone. Their legacy bled out and buried. And the man behind it, Vance Hollow, hadn't done it for money. He'd done it for revenge. He wanted the land beneath the ridge, the land Elias had refused to sell. Land laced with silver as if God had scribbled secrets through the stone. Hollow had taken everything, and now he wanted the last thing she had left. A map, her father's hand-drawn testament to what lay hidden beneath those hills. She hadn't told Hollow where it was. He'd just smiled and said, "You'll change your mind before sundown." That was yesterday. She didn't know how many hours she'd drifted in and out of the haze when a sound pierced the stillness, hooves slow and steady thudding like a heartbeat through the scorched air. Naya raised her head. Her vision blurred. She thought she was dreaming. But then she saw him. A lone rider crested the ridge, his silhouette etched against the blinding sky. He rode a Mustang, dusty, weathered and lean like the man atop him. No badge, no uniform, just a wide hat, a faded shirt, and the kind of presence that seemed carved from the land itself. He stopped, still as a stone. For a breathless moment, he didn't move. She couldn't tell if he was weighing whether to help or keep riding. Then slowly he dismounted. Boots crunching dry earth. She tried to speak. All that came was a whisper. "Water." He uncapped the canteen from his saddle, knelt, and lifted it to her lips. The first drop hit her tongue like a miracle. She coughed, gasped, drank again until her chest ached. Then her eyes lifted to his face. "Tayan," she breathed. He froze. The name hung between them like a ghost. He didn't reply. His dark eyes born of Apache blood, and a distant Scottish trace searched her face not with anger, but something quieter, as if making sure she was real. Then he rose. A blade flashed in the sunlight as he cut the rope. Her arms dropped useless. She began to fall. He caught her. His hands were just as she remembered, rough, calloused, strong. The touch jolted her. 5 years folded in on themselves, rushing back in a heartbeat. 5 years since she'd vanished without a goodbye. 5 years since she'd seen the pain she put in his eyes. "Easy," he said, his voice low and gravel thick. He guided her gently to a fallen log near the creek. She tried to speak again, but her throat still burned. She managed only, "I didn't think you shouldn't be out here." He cut in, not meeting her gaze. He dampened a cloth and pressed it carefully to her torn wrists. "This land's poison right now." She let out a dry, bitter laugh. "I'm starting to believe that." He glanced over at her just once, then turned back to the horizon. "Did they hurt you?" "Just my pride," she said. Her voice caught between shame and sarcasm. Tayan didn't answer. He moved back to Dusty, checked the saddle, and stood there for a long moment, like he was debating a heavy truth. She thought maybe, just maybe, he'd ask her what happened, why she was there. But he didn't. He just reached for the reins. "You'll be all right now," he said, eyes still on the desert. "Follow the creek east. It'll lead you to the road by sundown." Naya blinked. "You're leaving?" He gave a single nod. "There's nothing out here for either of us." And just like that, he mounted Dusty. She wanted to call out, to explain, to beg, but the words tangled in her chest. All she could do was say his name again. "Tayan." He paused for only a heartbeat. The wind lifted a strand of his long black hair. Then he nudged the Mustang forward. He never looked back. She watched until heat shimmer swallowed him whole. The silence he left behind was louder than the sun, louder than the wind. She crawled to the edge of Whispering Creek and splashed a handful of muddy water on her face. Her reflection stared back at her sunburnt, hollow-eyed, barely a woman anymore. "There's nothing out here for either of us," she repeated under her breath. "That's what you think." She turned toward the fading hoofprints in the sand. She'd walked away from Tayan Wolfmark once to save his life, but she wouldn't walk away again. Not now. Not ever. His gaze stayed fixed on the wide open land. "Follow the creek east. You'll find the road before nightfall." Naya Riverbloom blinked against the sun. "You're just going to leave Tayan Wolfmark," gave a single nod. "Ain't nothing out here for either of us." And just like that, he swung into the saddle. Dusty shifted under him, restless as ever. Naya's heart twisted. Words sat heavy in her throat but wouldn't rise. All she could breathe was his name. Softer now. Almost a whisper. "Tayan." He paused only a second. The wind caught the brim of his hat, lifted a strand of his long black hair. Then he pressed his heel gently, and Dusty moved on, never looking back. She watched until the heat swallowed him, turning him into a shimmer on the horizon. The beat of hooves faded. In their place, only the dry whisper of wind through brittle reeds. Even with the sun searing down, she felt cold inside. Her knees buckled as she tried to stand. She crawled instead to the edge of Whispering Creek, cupped her hands, and splashed muddy water over her face. The ripples showed a woman she hardly recognized. Burnt skin, cracked lips, dust-caked hair. Eyes too tired to be afraid. "There's nothing out here for either of us," she echoed bitterly. "That's what you think." Her eyes traced the faint hoofprints vanishing into the desert. The past pressed hard against her ribs. 5 summers ago, the smell of rain on stone, his laughter in the canyon the night she slipped away while he slept. She'd left to save him. Men like Vance Hollow would have hanged him just for loving her. Tayan never knew. Maybe he never would. But now, staring at the wasteland ahead, one thing rang true. He might have walked away, but she wasn't finished with him. Not yet. She tore a strip from her torn sleeve, bound her wrists tight, and forced herself upright. The horizon shimmered like a distant lie. But she remembered his words, "Follow the creek east." One last glance to the place he disappeared. Then she walked. Slow, stubborn. Her shadow stretched long behind her. The sun began to drop bleeding red across the hills. Somewhere ahead, the man she'd loved and maybe still did was riding toward a life without her. But Naya Riverbloom had learned something about deserts. If you walk long enough, even the driest river finds its way to water. By the time sunlight touched the edge of Mescalero Ridge, Naya caught sight of the trail again. Hoofprints half buried in dust headed east, same as her. Her legs trembled, lips cracked from thirst, but she didn't slow. Every step throbbed, but the ache in her chest hurt worse. Around mid-morning she saw it, a thin curl of smoke rising from a low camp tucked near a dry wash. One horse, one rider. She didn't need to see his face to know. Tayan was crouched beside the fire coffee pot, resting on a flat stone. Dusty grazed nearby tail, flicking lazy circles in the air. When he turned, his face didn't change. No surprise? No welcome. Just a quiet narrowing of his eyes. "You again?" he muttered. Naya let her broken hat fall in the dirt. "You left me with no gun, no horse, and a death sentence on my back." "What was I supposed to do?" "Die politely. I told you where the road was," he said flatly. "I couldn't make it that far. That ain't my problem." "It is now," she snapped. "Because I'm here." He sighed. Poured coffee into a tin cup, took a long, slow drink before answering. "You shouldn't have followed me." "That wasn't advice," she said, arms crossed. "That was an order. And last I checked, you don't get to give me those anymore." His jaw twitched. For a moment, something passed between them, not quite anger, but something older, heavier. Familiar. Then he looked away, stirred the fire. "Suit yourself," he muttered. "Just don't slow me down." She eased onto a flat stone, catching her breath. He handed her a cup without meeting her eyes. The coffee was thick, gritty, bitter as regret. She drank it anyway. It tasted like 5 lost years. "Thanks," she said softly. He didn't answer. Wind rustled through mesquite. Somewhere in the distance, thunder grumbled low over the hills. Naya studied him, the set of his shoulders, the scars on his wrists, the way his hair fell longer now. The boy she knew had vanished. What remained was harder, still quieter, roughened by time and solitude. "You've been living out here all this time?" she asked, doing what breathing he said. "Still not much for talking." "Still not much for listening," she shot back. He didn't argue. She almost smiled. Almost. For a long while, silence sat heavy between them. The fire crackled softly. Overhead, a hawk let out a sharp cry, slicing through the open sky. Everything around them felt vast and hollow, like the world had stretched too far. Finally, Naya Riverbloom broke the stillness. "Aren't you going to ask why I was tied up near the creek?" Tayan Wolfmark shrugged. "I can guess. Go ahead. Your family's always had a way of getting tangled in things too big to handle." His tone was even, but it carried a sharp edge. "Land deals. Silver claims. Same tale as half the folks who came west. They dig too deep, then get buried in their own mess." Naya's throat tightened. "So that's what you think I am? Just my father's mistakes." He turned to her gaze, steady. "I think some names carry trouble, and Riverbloom's one of them." The words landed deeper than she expected. They hurt more than she wanted to admit. "You don't know everything that happened. I know enough. No," she snapped, setting her tin cup down hard. "You don't. If you did, you wouldn't look at me like I deserved what happened." "Maybe I wouldn't," he said. "Maybe I still would." Their eyes locked, 5 years of silence pressed tight in the space between them. The wind shifted again, bringing the dry scent of storm and desert dust. Tayan broke the moment, tossed the rest of his coffee into the flames. "Pack your things. We move before noon. I didn't agree to go anywhere with you." He turned to face her fully. His voice dropped low. "If Hollow sent men after you, they won't be far behind." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "You stay here, you die. You ride with me, maybe you don't. That's your call. She hated that he was right. Hated the way his calm logic made her feel small and exposed. Still, she gave a slow, stiff nod. Fine. I'll ride with you. For now. Tayan gave one short nod, then turned back to Dusty. He tightened the cinch on the saddle, then reached into his bag and tossed her a small pouch. Eat. You'll need the strength. She caught it awkwardly. Her fingers brushed the worn leather. Still the gentleman, she muttered. Don't confuse that with kindness. Oh, trust me, she said dryly. I wouldn't dare. They rode the rest of the afternoon in silence, heading north along the dry wash. Cactus sprouted from cracked rock, and the land rolled gently upward toward a jagged ridge. The heat shimmered off the sand. Every breath scraped her throat like gravel. Her borrowed mare stumbled twice over loose stones. Dusty never missed a step. Near sundown, they came to a stand of twisted juniper trees. Tayan called a halt, dismounted, and began collecting firewood. Naya slid off her saddle, her knees aching. She rubbed them, wincing. How much farther to town, Idris? If we're lucky, one more day. And if we're not? Then Hollow finds you before we get there. Finds us, she corrected. Tayan glanced over his shoulder. Don't make this about us, Naya. It already is. He didn't answer. Just kept building the fire methodical and quiet. When the flames caught the light, flickered across his face, softening his hard features for the briefest second. She realized she was staring. Looked away. Why did you come back here? She asked softly. After what happened, after they blamed your people for the mine killings? He stirred the fire with a stick, watching the embers flare. This is still my land, he said. Doesn't matter what they name it. She hesitated. Does it ever get easier? What being caught between two worlds? Half one thing, half another. He met her eyes then, and for once there was no fire behind his gaze. Just something quiet. Worn down. No. You just figure out which side hates you less. His words struck deeper than she expected. She looked down at her hands, scraped and bruised. Maybe that's why we understood each other once, she said. Once he echoed quietly. Then he stood brushing dust from his palms. Get some rest. I'll take first watch. The fire settled low, its glow a soft pulse in the darkness. Naya curled under his spare blanket, eyes tracing stars through the branches overhead. The air had cooled. It smelled of rain and creosote. She could hear him moving beyond the light, quiet, careful steps. Her mind drifted back to younger days, to a boy who used to laugh so freely, who called her Sunbird when she'd sneak out to meet him by the creek. He'd taught her how to track rabbits, how to read wind and dirt. She taught him books. Words. Back then, they thought love could build a world bigger than any wall. They'd both been wrong. And yet, as she lay there now, it wasn't just regret that filled her chest. It was something softer. He was alive. And somehow that was more than she thought she'd ever get again. Far in the distance, thunder rolled once more. Naya Riverbloom turned slightly toward him, her voice barely more than breath. You still don't know why I left. Tayan Wolfmark didn't respond. Maybe he hadn't heard, or maybe he wasn't ready to. But after a long pause, his voice drifted through the dark. Quiet. Steady. Get some sleep, Naya. Tomorrow won't be easier. At first light, dawn stretched across the desert in pale gold ribbons. They broke camp in silence, moving like two people who'd done this before once, a long time ago when things were different. As they mounted up, Naya couldn't hold the question in. You really think I'll slow you down? Tayan adjusted Dusty's reins, never looking at her. I think you already have. She gave a short laugh, half insult, half memory. You're welcome. He cast her a quick side glance. The barest ghost of a smile touched his lips. Then he nudged Dusty forward, and they rode into the morning side by side, their shadows long behind them. They didn't speak, but the desert seemed to whisper between them, an old rhythm, awakening a pulse they both still knew. And for the first time in years, Naya felt that pull again, that quiet, uneasy draw toward a man she thought she'd lost forever. By noon, they reached Las Beatriz, a sun-scorched town lying low under the open sky. A few lazy threads of smoke curled from crooked chimneys. The main street was dust and splinters lined with weather-beaten buildings, a saloon, a chapel, a feed store, and a tired diner with a faded red sign swaying on rusted chains. The scent of burnt grease and coffee reached them before their horses did. It wasn't much, but after weeks in the wilderness, even this forgotten stretch of frontier felt like something close to civilization. Tayan reined Dusty in beside the hitching post. This is where we part, he said simply. Naya dismounted her borrowed mare, dusted her skirt. You said you'd see me safe. You are, he replied, meeting her eyes with cool finality. Now. She opened her mouth to argue, but the firmness in his tone closed it. Without another word, he turned and led Dusty across the street toward the livery. Within moments, he disappeared into the rhythm of hooves and heat. For a beat, Naya stood in the middle of the street, anger and something else rising in her like smoke. Fine, she muttered. Let him vanish again. Squaring her shoulders, she stepped into the diner. Behind the counter stood a broad-shouldered woman, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair tied back with a red cloth. Etta Miles looked her over without blinking. You know how to carry plates? Wash dishes, I can do both, Naya replied. Etta gave a faint smile. Then start now. The boys from the mines eat like starved wolves. Just like that, Naya Riverbloom became a waitress in Las Beatriz. By late afternoon, she'd poured enough coffee to drown a campfire. The heat outside shimmered like beaten glass. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of bacon grease and old tobacco. When the front door creaked open, she didn't even look up until she heard the voice. Coffee. Her hand froze on the pot. Tayan sat near the window hat, pulled low. Same trail-dusted shirt. Same unreadable expression. For a flicker of a second, she thought maybe he'd come to check on her. But he didn't even glance her way. You again, she muttered, pouring coffee into his cup. You work here now, apparently. He took a sip. Grimaced. Too bitter. Then maybe you shouldn't drink it. He almost smiled, almost. Still sharp-tongued, I see. And you still have a way of showing up, she said. Can't seem to avoid me, can you? This time his eyes lifted to meet hers. For a blink, they softened. Then he looked away. Guess the desert's not big enough. Etta came by, drying her hands on her apron. You two know each other? Naya hesitated. Once. Etta's eyes sparkled. Good. Then you can show him the barn out back. My husband stores feed there. We could use a man who knows horses. Tayan raised a brow. I'm not looking for work. Then don't take the pay. Etta shrugged. Stable your horse for free? He paused, considered her offer, then nodded once. Fine. Naya could feel her face warming. Wonderful, she muttered. Now we get to bump into each other daily. The days rolled on like tumbleweeds, restless and hard to pin down. Each morning, Naya served plates to miners, ranchers, and travelers. Her apron grew heavy with dust and coffee stains. Every afternoon, she spotted Tayan behind the barn, brushing down Dusty, patching up tack quiet as stone. They spoke only when they had to brief, clipped words that carried more beneath them than either dared unpack. One morning, as Naya Riverbloom carried a tray of hot biscuits past a table of rowdy miners, a red-faced man with whiskey on his breath reached out and grabbed her wrist. "Well now, darlin'," he slurred. "You sure don't look local. Where have they been hidin' a thing like you?" "Let go," Naya said sharply. The man chuckled, gripping tighter. "Don't be shy now." Before she could pull away, the sound of boots thudded hard against the floorboards. Tayan Wolfmark appeared beside her in a blink, his hand locking around the miner's wrist like iron. She said, "Let go." The miner squinted up at him, snarling, "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Tayan didn't answer. He twisted the man's wrist in one smooth motion. The miner yelped, his mug crashing to the floor in a burst of beer and glass. "Someone who doesn't care for noise," Tayan said calmly. The diner went still. Even the stove seemed to hush. Then Etta Miles's voice rang out sharp as a rifle crack. "Both of you outside. Now." Tayan let go. The miner stumbled back, cursing under his breath as he shoved through the door. Naya stood frozen, pulse hammering. After the door slammed, Etta pointed a flour-dusted finger at Tayan. "Break one more chair in here, cowboy, and I'll charge you double." Tayan gave a short nod, eyes flicking once, just once, to Naya. "Won't happen again." When he left, Naya leaned against the counter, her breath catching up with her. Etta gave her a sly look. "You sure he's just a stable hand?" Naya rolled her eyes. "Don't start." That night the sky hung low and thick thunder grumbling in the distance like a warning that never came. Naya locked up the diner, rubbing her sore wrists. She stepped out to find Tayan leaning against the corral rail, moonlight catching on the blade of his knife as he whittled a small piece of cedar. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. He didn't glance up. "Done what? Jumped in like that? I had it under control." He let out a soft laugh. "Sure you did." She stiffened. "I don't need saving." "You keep saying that," he replied, flicking a wood chip into the dirt. "But trouble seems to keep picking your trail." "Maybe it's following you," she shot back. He finally looked up, a flicker of dry amusement in his eyes. "Could be." For a while, neither said anything. The air was thick with the scent of mesquite and dust. The moon painted the world in shades of silver. Naya studied him, the faint scar just above his collarbone, the sharp line of his jaw, the quiet strength in the way he stood still, like he belonged more to the land than to the people walking it. "You ever think," she said softly, "maybe fate's got a mean sense of humor? Every time I try to start fresh, there you are, right in the middle of it." He smiled, then not sarcastic, not guarded. Just honest quiet. Maybe fate's just trying to finish what we started. Her breath caught. Before she could answer, thunder cracked again, closer this time. Dusty snorted and shifted behind the fence. Tayan turned his gaze toward the horizon. "Storm's coming. You should head in. And you, I'll stay with the horses. Still stubborn. Still talking," he said, but the edge was gone from his voice. It almost sounded like teasing. By dawn, the rain had come, not a storm, just a light, steady fall that softened the dust and filled the air with the scent of earth. Naya stepped outside the diner and watched it patter against the rails and rooftops. Tayan was already out there, soaked to the shoulders, coaxing Dusty under the lean-to. When he spotted her, he nodded once. "Mornin'." "Mornin'," she echoed. "Coffee's on." He hesitated. "Then I'll take some." Inside, they sat across from each other, steam curling from chipped mugs. Neither raised their voice. The rain tapped soft on the windows, a rhythm that filled the silence without needing to break it. "Guess you were right," she said finally. "Trouble keeps showing up." "Maybe I was wrong," he replied quietly. "Maybe you walked straight into it." Naya smiled. Small. Real. Maybe I did. 5 years ago. He looked at her, then meeting her gaze square. She didn't look away. "Maybe I'm still walking," she said. For the first time since the desert, he laughed low and warm, a sound like worn leather and old firelight. Outside, the rain picked up, washing the street clean. Neither said what they were thinking, but both of them knew it. Whatever road they'd been walking, twisted, lonely, broken, it had led them back to the same place. And even if they didn't call it home just yet, Las Beatrices had become the one speck on the map where they both belonged. At least, for now. Summer heat returned quick after the rain, and the dust never stayed down for long. By noon, Las Piedras shimmered beneath a pale stretch of sky, heat waves rippling off rooftops. The streets, baked dry once more, bore only the faintest ghost of yesterday's rain clinging to the breeze like a memory refusing to fade. Naya Riverbloom was scrubbing down the diner counter when two strangers pushed through the front door. They didn't move like ranch hands. Their dust-covered coats were too clean, their boots too polished, and their eyes too alert. They took a table near the back, whispering between themselves while scanning the room like they were waiting on trouble to arrive. Etta Miles leaned toward Naya. "Those two, they asked for you." Naya froze. "Me," Etta nodded grimly. "Said they're from Vance Hollow's company, looking for a runaway thief." Naya forced a tight smile, but her stomach twisted into knots. She already knew they had the right woman. Trouble had finally found its way back. That evening, with the sky blazing red over the hills, the same two men appeared again, this time by the corral out back. Tayan Wolfmark stepped into their path before they could reach the rear door of the diner. "Evening, boys," he said, voice low and calm. One of them nodded, hand already resting too casual on the butt of his revolver. "Evening. We're looking for a woman goes by Naya Riverbloom. You seen her?" Tayan tilted his head slightly. "Depends who's asking." "Business partners of Mr. Hollow," the man said flatly. "She took something that don't belong to her." Tayan's eyes narrowed, his voice like flint striking rock. "Men who use rope and sun to squeeze answers from women don't usually talk much about what's worth stealing." The second man sneered. "You got a smart mouth for a half-breed." Tayan's tone dropped colder. "And you got too many teeth for a man who pulls iron." The second man reached first, but his hand barely grazed his holster before Tayan's boot slammed into his ribs, sending him sprawling into the dirt with a strangled grunt. The first man drew, but Tayan already had his revolver out dead steady and aimed square at his chest. "Tell Hollow," Tayan said softly, "this desert's a long ride to die for another man's greed." They backed off fast, dragging their winded partner with them. Dust kicked high behind their horses as they fled. When Tayan turned around, Naya was standing in the doorway, white as chalk in the moonlight. "They were looking for me," she whispered. "I gathered," he said. "He won't stop, Tayan. Hollow won't quit until he gets what he's after. And what's that?" She reached into her apron pocket, fingers trembling. Slowly, she unfolded a worn cloth. Inside was a small map, edges yellowed, the ink faded with time. "My father's," she said, her voice tight. A map to the old silver vein under Whispering Creek Ridge. Hollow murdered him for refusing to sell. Tayan's gaze darkened. He killed Elias Riverbloom, or had it done. She stared down at the map, her voice quivering. "He wants what's buried out there, and he'll tear down anyone who stands in his way." "You kept this," Tayan asked quietly. It's all I had left of him. He took the map, fingers brushing the brittle paper. This ridge, he said, tapping a line. It cuts across Apache land. My father died trying to protect it, Naya said, eyes locking with his. And Hollow took from both of us. The wind swept between them, thick with dust and silence. 2 families. 2 graves. One man's hunger tying it all together. We have to go, Tayan said at last. Go where somewhere Hollow can't follow. Maybe up in the high country. I can't keep running, she whispered. I've been running since the day I left you. His jaw tightened. You left to run, remember, she snapped. I left to save you. He blinked. The fire in her voice stopped him. She stepped closer, words spilling raw from her chest. They said they'd hang you, Tayan, Hollow's men. They told me if I didn't disappear, they'd come after you for my father's debts. I thought leaving would protect you. I thought it was the right thing. Silence followed. Only the wind answered. Then something shifted in his face. The steel gave way just a little. You left for me. She nodded, tears at the edge of her voice. And I hated myself every damn day after. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, shoulders tense. I spent years thinking you threw me away, like I wasn't good enough, just another half-blood Apache with no place in your world. I never believed that. He faced her again, voice low. But you made me believe it. I know, she whispered. And I'm sorry. They stood so close now. Naya could see the dust clinging to Tayan's lashes, the faint scar by his lip, the one she remembered kissing on a long-forgotten night beneath a different sky. The air between them hummed heavy with feeling. Say something, she murmured. He stepped closer, close enough their foreheads almost touched. 5 years, he said, voice rough. 5 years I hated you, Naya Riverbloom. Turns out I was angry at the wrong person. Before she could speak, his hand rose to her cheek. Thumb, brushing away a tear, with a gentleness that didn't match the calluses. She leaned into his palm, breath tight in her chest. Then he kissed her. It wasn't tender. It was years of pain, silence, blame, and everything left unsaid. It was wildfire and thunder. When they pulled apart, she was shaking. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder echoed again over Whispering Creek Ridge. That night, they fled Las Piedras before Vance Hollow's men could circle back. The desert spread out before them, silver under a rising moon quiet, save for the soft rhythm of hooves and the whispering wind. By first light, they reached the foothills. A ledge of redstone offered shelter, and they made camp beneath it. Naya unwrapped the map with trembling fingers, smoothing it on a flat rock. This trail here, she said, pointing leads to an old shaft. My father hid documents there, deeds, letters, proof that Hollow forged every contract he claimed. Tayan didn't hesitate. Then that's where we go. The rising sun bathed the stone in gold. Naya watched him for a moment. The storm inside him was gone, replaced by something quiet, unshakable. You never stopped fighting, she said. I stopped once, he murmured. Didn't end well. A small smile curved her lips. Maybe this time it will. He didn't answer, but something in his eyes softened. Get some rest, he said. I'll keep watch. She lay down beside the fire. Her body ached, but her heart had found a strange stillness. Just before sleep pulled her under, she whispered, You're not still angry? Tayan's gaze stayed on the flames. His voice came low. No, just sorry for all the time we lost. That evening the sky split open. A wild summer storm rolled off the mountains. Lightning cracked across the ridges, thunder chasing it down through the canyons. They huddled together inside a shallow cave. The fire sputtered. Rain drummed steady on stone. Naya wrapped her shawl tight around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the flicker of firelight across his face. "You remember the first rain we shared?" she asked. He nodded. "By Whispering Creek. You said rain makes the desert bloom." "Still true," she said softly. "Even the driest places can bloom again." Tayan turned, really looking at her, and for the first time in 5 long years, peace flickered in his eyes. "Maybe that's us," he said. She smiled. Tears mingled with the rain on her cheeks. "Maybe." They sat in silence, the storm raging around them like a memory too big to hold back. When thunder began to roll farther off, Tayan added a branch to the fire and looked toward her. "When the sky clears," he said, "we ride to Whispering Creek Ridge." And then he looked toward the mouth of the cave, voice low but certain. "Then we finish what they started." Outside, the rain quieted to a whisper. The first stars broke through the clouds. Naya leaned against him, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. A sound she thought she'd never hear again. For the first time in 5 years, she wasn't running. Whatever waited on that ridge, justice, danger, redemption, she'd meet it beside him. And that made all the difference. The next morning dawned gray and still air thick with the smell of rain and dust. Naya stirred to find Tayan already saddling Dusty. The map was tucked into his vest, the ink of her father's hand now etched in both their minds. "Storm's moving east," he said, glancing at the pale horizon. "We should go before the trail turns to mud." Naya stood brushing the sleep from her eyes. "You think Hollow will follow us out this far? He's too greedy not to." They rode in silence through narrow canyons, red rock glowing faint beneath the early sun. The land here felt older than memory, quiet and watchful. Tayan rode with the ease of someone who knew it well. His people had hunted these ridges long before fences, before deeds, and paper laws. Now even the wind felt like it was whispering warnings through the sage. By midday, they reached the mouth of an abandoned shaft half-collapsed, nearly hidden behind twisted juniper. A cold draft drifted from within thick with the scent of iron and wet stone. "This is it," Naya said, her voice hushed. Tayan dismounted, drew his revolver. "Stay close." Inside the tunnel dimmed to rust-colored gloom. Their boots crunched over gravel. Each step echoed, and the deeper they went, the colder the earth became. A few hundred feet in the tunnel widened into a small chamber held up by rotting timber beams. A rusted lantern dangled from a bent nail overhead, long since burned out. Naya Riverbloom dropped to her knees beside a pile of loose stones. "He once told me," she whispered, brushing dirt with her hand, "he hid it near a marking. Said I'd know it if I saw it." Her fingers found it, a faint carving etched into the stone wall. A letter worn with time, but unmistakable. Her father's mark. Beneath it, in a tight crevice, was a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. Tayan Wolfmark stood nearby, watching her unwrap the bundle. Inside, brittle papers, crumbling deeds, letters inked with desperation, and one document stamped with Vance Hollow's name and a signature that didn't belong to him. Forged. Every word of it. Proof. All of it. Naya exhaled, tears threatening behind her eyes. The weight in her chest shifted grief and hope, tangling like roots in dry earth. "We can clear my father's name," she whispered. "And yours." But before Tayan could speak, a faint sound echoed down the tunnel behind them. Voices. Boots. Men. Tayan stiffened. Riders. Naya's eyes went wide. Hollow's men. He must have followed our tracks. Tayan didn't hesitate. He shoved the bundle into his coat, grabbed her hand. Run! They bolted for the entrance, boots pounding the gravel. As soon as daylight burst through the mouth of the mine, a shot cracked bullets sparking off the rock beside them. Naya gasped. Tayan yanked her down behind a boulder. A dozen riders had already fanned out across the slope, rifles gleaming in the sun. At their center, cool and smug as ever, sat Vance Hollow, broad-shouldered silver hair slicked back the desert, reflecting in his snake smile. Well, hell, he drawled, tugging his reins. Didn't expect to catch y'all this easy. Naya stepped out from cover fury, flaring bright in her chest. You murdered my father! Hollow barked a laugh. Your daddy was a stubborn fool who didn't know when to sell. You should have learned from his mistake. Tayan's revolver was already out-leveled without a tremble. Hollow, unfazed, lifted a gloved hand. Easy now, Wolfmark. I got more lead in these rifles than you got breath left. Tayan's voice didn't waver. Then why are we still talking? Because I prefer deals, Hollow said. Give me the map and those papers and maybe I let the girl live. Naya gripped Tayan's arm. Don't do it. He didn't blink. You're lying. Maybe Hollow said. Maybe not. Thunder rolled faint and distant above Whispering Creek Ridge. The scent of rain mingled with gunpowder. Tayan's thumb eased over the hammer of his gun. Last chance, Hollow warned. Mine too, Tayan said. Then the world exploded. Gunfire shattered the canyon's hush. Tayan's first shot dropped the man closest to Hollow. Naya dove behind a rock, lungs burning as smoke filled the air. Bullets slammed into the stone around her. Tayan moved like wind across rock, vanishing, reappearing, firing. 2 men hit the dirt before they could reload. But there were too many. Back, he shouted. Inside, they rushed into the mine just as another barrage rang out. The tunnel shook with every blast. Naya clutched the bundle against her chest. Tayan grabbed an old lantern, sparked it to life, and turned to her. We'll take the other shaft. It opens out near the ridge. Before they could move, a voice echoed in the dark. You can't run forever, Wolfmark Vance Hollow's voice. Closer now. Tayan's jaw clenched. Stay behind me. They pushed deeper into the mine, the lantern casting wild shadows on crumbling walls. Then a shot. The lantern shattered. Darkness swallowed them whole. Tayan tackled Naya to the ground just as a bullet hissed past their heads. Another flash closer lit Hollow's silhouette just yards away. Tayan fired once. The blast roared like thunder in the confined space. Hollow stumbled, clutching his shoulder, but he didn't fall. You think you can kill me, half-breed, he growled, voice full of venom. You don't even know who owns this land. I know who stole it, Tayan said, coldly. Hollow laughed through the pain. You think killing me changes anything? The companies, the courts. They'll still take everything. He tilted his chin toward Naya. Folks like you, you'll always end up in the dirt. Naya's hands trembled. The revolver Tayan had given her felt heavier now, but her grip was firm. She raised it, aimed. Her voice barely a breath. Maybe. At least now Naya Riverbloom whispered finger tight on the trigger. We'll stand on our own land. She fired. The shot thundered through the narrow tunnel. Vance Hollow's face twisted in shock as the bullet struck. He dropped to his knees, his revolver slipping from his hand, clattering across the stone. Then he crumpled forward, motionless. The flame from his fallen lantern flickered once and died. For a long, long moment, there was nothing but silence, the slow drip of water from the ceiling, rain above seeping through ancient cracks in the mine. Naya lowered the revolver chest, rising and falling. It's over. Tayan Wolfmark stepped toward her, his hand settling gently on her shoulder. No, he said softly. It's just beginning. By the time they climbed out of the mine, the storm had passed. But smoke curled above the ridge. One bullet had struck a powder crate near the shaft. Now flames crawled across the brush, greedy and fast. The sky was lit orange, the whole valley cast in wildfire light. They rode hard down the narrow pass, heat on their backs like a second sun. Behind them, the mine gave out with a hollow roar, the ground quaking as the mountain swallowed its secrets. At the bottom of the ridge, they pulled up. Naya looked back. The fire roared high, furious and alive. But inside her, something else had broken loose. Something quieter. Grief, yes, but also release. Like a weight was lifting. Land's clean now, Tayan murmured beside her. The lies died with him, she said. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. And maybe the ghosts, too. Rain began again, soft, steady. It fell on the flames, turning smoke to steam. Tayan reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate. She took it. They stood together watching smoke twist into the sky, the ridge glowing like iron in the forge of dawn. The past was burning away, and with it the things that had kept them apart for too long. Autumn came slow to Whispering Creek country. The fire left scars, charred trees, and a scent of ash that hung for weeks. But when the rains returned, green crept through the black. Sage and mesquite rising again, stubborn as hope. By then, Naya and Tayan had built a small cabin at the foot of the ridge. Just 2 rooms, a porch, and a view of the creek that had nearly been their grave. The land bore its history in ash lines and healed roots. But the soil was rich now. The water ran clear between the stones. Tayan spent his days behind the cabin working a small corral, breaking mustangs for trade. Naya taught reading and numbers to settler children and a few Apache families who came down from the reservation. Her chalkboard leaned against the porch. The alphabet smudged and proud, written by young hands. Most evenings they sat outside watching the sky burn gold over the hills. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. One crisp October morning, Tayan returned from the barn with a saddle blanket slung over his shoulder. Naya was hanging laundry, her hair catching the breeze. He stopped a moment, watching her. The same woman who once rode into his world like a storm, and stayed. "You're staring," she called without turning. "Just wondering how you keep the white in that dress after a dust storm," he said deadpan. She laughed that soft silver laugh he never got tired of. Trade secret. He stepped closer, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "You like it here?" She looked toward the ridge. No more smoke, no more ghosts. It feels like a place that could start again. He nodded. Then it's good enough. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Silas Granger rode up the trail with 2 deputies behind him. Tayan met them at the gate, hand resting near his holster out of habit. "Mornin', Wolfmark," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Didn't mean to spook you." "You didn't?" Tayan replied coolly. "Just used to men riding in with less manners." Granger dismounted, boots crunching dry ground. "Word from Santa Fe," he said. The court reviewed the papers Miss Riverbloom gave us, her father's deeds, his letters. "It's official now." He looked toward the porch where Naya stood watching. Fraud. Murder. Theft. Hollow's holdings are being turned back to the families he stole from. His men scattered. "You're free, both of you." Naya smiled, soft, but real. "Thank you, Sheriff." I wasn't sure I'd ever hear those words. Granger nodded. "You earned 'em. And for what it's worth—" He looked to Tayan. Haken would have been proud. Tayan blinked. The name hit like a wind across old ashes. "You knew of him. He stood tall when most folks wouldn't. Looks like the apple didn't fall too far." The sheriff mounted again and rode off. Dust curled behind the hooves. Naya turned to Tayan. "Hakan." He looked out toward the hills, voice quiet. "My father. They killed him on this land. He tried to protect the springs from Hollow's men." Naya Riverbloom said, her voice low. Tayan Wolfmark took her hand as she stepped closer. "Then we did right by him." He nodded slowly, eyes tracing the horizon where dawn brushed the ridge. "Maybe now he can rest." The days after passed gently. Their cabin filled with the kinds of little things that made a place feel like home. The creak of the porch swing, the smell of coffee just before sunrise, the quiet sound of Naya humming while she wrote in her lesson books. Children from the reservation would sometimes bring small gifts, beaded bracelets, feathers, warm loaves of bread. In return, Tayan carved them toy horses, just as Hakan Crowshield had once carved for him. For the first time in years, the world seemed to fit. One evening, when the air turned sharp and carried the scent of coming winter, Naya stood by Whispering Creek, rinsing a tin cup. The setting sun lit the water red. She felt him approach before he said a word. "Sky's bleeding tonight," Tayan murmured behind her. "Means a cold one's comin'." "Then we'll light 2 fires," she replied. He smiled. "You always plan ahead." "Someone has to." She turned to him, her expression softer than the wind. "You know, I used to hate this creek. Why, it reminded me of the worst day of my life. And now," she looked down at the rippling water, "now it reminds me that even the driest places can come back to life." He nodded. "That's the way of this land. Breaks you first, then teaches you how to live." She reached out, brushing her fingers against his. "And what's it teaching you now?" Tayan paused, then answered, quiet and certain. "That peace isn't something you find, it's something you choose." She smiled. A small smile, but it stayed. Winter came soft and white. Frost clung to the cabin windows. Smoke curled from the chimney like a song whispered low. The mustangs in the corral thickened their coats and pawed at frozen earth. One night, with the wind howling down from the ridge, Naya awoke to find Tayan's voice drifting outside. She stepped onto the porch shawl around her shoulders. He stood at the fence, eyes to the stars. "Can't sleep?" she asked. He shook his head. "Just thinking." About what he hesitated, then looked toward her. About how we made it here. About how close I came to walking away again. She stepped down, frost crunching beneath her bare feet. "But you didn't." "No," he said. His breath fogged in the cold. "This time I stayed." They stood together, the moon spreading soft silver across the ridge, softening scars the fire left behind. "You ever wonder," Naya said, "what would have happened if we hadn't found each other again?" Tayan's voice came slow. "No, because I think we would have, somehow. Fate. Something like it." He smiled faintly. "A creek that runs dry still remembers the way it used to flow." She rested her head on his shoulder. The cold vanished. Spring returned like a promise. The hills turned green again, wildflowers bursting along the edges of fire-scarred slopes. Whispering Creek ran stronger than before, its voice sure and steady. One morning, Naya stood by the fence, a letter in hand. Tayan was nearby, mending tack. "It's from Etta Miles," she called. He looked up. "The diner gal, she says the children in Las Vegas want me to come teach this summer. She's even offering a proper schoolhouse." He set his work aside, wiping sweat from his brow. "You want to go? I thought maybe we both could. You could sell horses, I could teach." He studied her for a long beat, then smiled. "You really think they want an Apache horse trader and a runaway schoolteacher setting up shop in their town?" She laughed. "They'll get used to it." He shook his head, grinning. "Then let's give 'em something worth talking about." She stepped closer, hand against his chest. "You sure?" He covered her hand with his, pressed it over his heart. "I'm sure about you." That evening, as the sun dipped behind Mescalero Ridge, they sat together on the porch, a pot of coffee between them, the scent of mesquite in the air. Overhead, a hawk circled high, its cry sharp and cutting against the vast sky. Tayan watched it for a long moment. "My father used to say," he murmured, "if a hawk flies over running water, it means the land's forgiven." Naya followed his gaze, her eyes shining in the soft light. "Then maybe it's forgiving us too." He looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "No, Naya. It's blessing us." The hawk dipped once, twice, then vanished into the gold of the setting sun. Below the creek whispered its old song, steady and endless. And beneath the shadow of Mescalero Ridge, where fire once raged and love was lost and found again, peace finally came. Quiet. Lasting. True. For the first time in 5 long years, the land, the water, and the hearts that had survived them both belonged to each other again. Thank you for riding with us to the very end. If this tale stirred something in you, leave a like, share it with someone who needs hope, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next ride across the frontier. And tell us down below, what did the ending mean to you? We'll see you in the next story where the western sun rises again, bringing with it another chance for redemption.